uh, different pest infesting store grains. We are discussing. We discussed about the classification of storage pests. Then we discussed a bit about uh, the, what are the pests, the list of pests which are infesting stored grains. And then now we were discussing about various pests, coleoptera pest infesting stored grains. I think we have covered up to bruchids. We'll continue with that. Another bruchid is the that is interesting stored grain, that is groundnut bruchid. It's also called as tamarin beetle. Uh, the I think I told you when we discussed about the list. This tamarin beetle. Uh, Now I have a specimen which I can show you when you come back for your practicals. So this tamarin beetle, it's bigger in size. If you see pulse beetle, Calosobruchus and Caridons are side by side, you can easily identify it because it is larger in size, almost 5 to 7 mm in size. That one of the biggest, largest insect pest infesting storage. I don't think any other insect pest is having. Lepidopteran pest roughly about 5 mm in size, but still among the coleopterans, this is the biggest one. Again, just like any other uh, bruchid pest, it is globular in shape with long legs and antenna. But the elytra is light brown in color and it doesn't cover the abdomen fully. That is a typical character of all the bruchids. You can see bruchids as well as most of the chrysomelids. Here you can see this elytra doesn't cover the abdomen fully, and it is light brown in color with long legs and antennae. And one typical feature is that the hind femur is enlarged. You can see it over here. This is the hind femur. You might be remembering the segments of an insect like coxa, trochanter, femur, tibia, tarsus, etc. So this hind femur, the femur of the metathoracic leg, is enlarged. One more picture I can show you. Yes, here you can see the hind femur is enlarged. That is a typical feature of groundnut bruchid, and similar to other coleopterus which we had discussed, it is larvae scarabiform, and it is a primary pest of groundnut. So remember the typical feature is its larger size and enlargement of hind femur. Hind femur. Coming to the next pest, rice beaver Sitophilus oryzae. If you purchase uh, rice, especially raw rice and all, you can mostly see an infestation of rice weevil. This rice weevil is almost ubiquitous in nature. That's why in the slide, if you see it, you can see uh, it is written as cosmopolitan pest. Cosmopolitan means it is present all over the world, and it is a major pest of cereals. Though it attacks dry fruits, but it's a major pest of cereals, rice, wheat, maize, etc. And we have three species infesting stored grains, that is Sitophilus oryzae, Siamese, and Granarius. I think Sitophilus oryzae is the only species in our country. Again, as with any other curculeonid insect, the head is having a snout. Head is projected as a snout. That is a typical feature of any weevil. And the size is almost the same as that of what we had discussed about anopids, that is Lasioderma and Stegobium, 3 to 4 mm, dark brown to black in color. It's almost black in color. Elytra with two dull orange spots and thorax with circular punches. That you can see. You can see one, two, three, four. Elytra, each elytra is having two dull orange spots, and the elytra as well as the thorax is having circular punctures on it. And you can see the head prolonged into the snout. So That is typical feature of a curculioniid insect. It's dark brown to black in color. So it is having 3 to 4 mm in size, dark brown to black in color with two dull orange spots on each elytra, and the thorax is with circular punctures. This is a primary pest, that means it infers only undamaged grains, and it is an internal feeder. So this is a very critical pest. Its identification is extremely important because it's internal in nature. That's why we have discussed several detection techniques for, especially for Cytophilus. And similar to Brookids, it also starts its infestation in the field. It also has the ability to infest the grain when the grain is in the field itself. Both the stages, adult as well as grub stages, are damaging. Both are internal feeders and makes the grain hollow. So that is with respect to rice weevil, Cytophilus. We have three species: Granarius, Siamese, and Oraceae. So there is a snout as it is with every weevil, 3 to 4 mm in size, dark brown to black in color with dull orange spots on the elytra and circular punctures on the thorax. It's present all over the world. Primary pest, internal feeder, both adults as well as grubs damage. It can infest grains when the crop is in the field itself. This is the life history. Okay. Here you can see it feeds on the grains. If you see Rhizoperta, we discussed about lesser grain borer Rhizoperta. It also is an internal feeder. But if you see the pictures which I have shown you earlier, I will show that picture. See this. This is Rhizoperta. There you can see this is almost a perfect hole, perfect circular hole. The Rhizoperta that makes in the grain. But Cytophilus, if you see, it's not that a perfect circular hole. See, this is an irregular hole which it makes in the grain. Here you can see it's a slightly elongated here also. So that's one way. Certain textbooks say that that's one way. If you have can't see any insect, if you have only the damaged grain, that's one way to identify whether it is caused by Rhizoperta or Cytophilus. Okay. Then coming to the next one, Capra beetle, Trogoderma granarium. Basically, it's a pest of North India. We usually don't get Trogoderma infestation in our state because this is a pest which prefers extremely dry condition and temperature. In Kerala, the not high temperature is not that prevalent, and almost always we have a humid condition. We have moisture all over the atmosphere, so it's not that common in our state. So we usually don't see it, and but it is an extremely common pest in North India, and from North India it has spread. Actually, it's a pest of Indian origin, and it is spread to all over the world, and the adults are a slightly smaller in size, 2 to 4 mm. The it is oval in shape, and you can see the body is covered with hairs. That is one typical feature. Body is covered with hairs, oval in shape. Elytra is unmarked or with light markings, but one typical feature is that antennae is clubbed. That you can see clubbed antenna. The last few segments are enlarged. Apical segments of antenna is enlarged. So light brown in color, hairy in nature, oval in shape. The last few segments of antenna is enlarged. Okay, sorry. Now, slightly smaller in size compared to the insects which we had discussed earlier. As I discussed when we discussed about the classification of insects, one thing I told you is unlike other coleoptera pests, this is a pest which is an external feeder. It's not an internal feeder, it's an external feeder, and the larvae is extremely mobile, move around the grain, feeds from outside, and all its exuviate. Do you know what is an exuviate? You might have studied in UG. Molting remains, yes, good. That is the molted skin. Molted skin, that is the molted skin, is called as the exuvi. So the molted skin of the grubs will be present all over the grain. If you see a grain infested with Trogoderma capra beetle, you can see the top portion of the grain will be having lot of this exuvi. I will show you a picture of it. We have specific, we can show you during the practicals. So the exuvia will be present in the grains, and as we have discussed, this is an insect which can survive without food for about 4 years. That is one typical feature. Extremely hardy insect. See, the grubs are also hairy in nature, and you can see whatever you see it over here. This one, this all these are the molted skin of the grubs of Capra beetle, Trogoderma. So that is one typical feature. No other insect has it. Though tribolium may have a bit of it, but not like Capra beetle, Trogoderma. And the first instar larvae, though it is considered as a primary pest, the first instar larvae doesn't have the ability to feed on whole grains, sound grains. So first instar larvae can be considered as a secondary pest because it can feed only on damaged grains. This is extremely critical. You can see if you want to prevent Tropoderma infestation, whatever grains you store, it should be whole, sound, without any damaged grains. Because if you are not having any damaged grain, the first instar grubs of Tropoderma cannot survive. But from second instar onwards, it doesn't need broken grains. Even whole grains is sufficient. So it is considered as both primary as well as a secondary pest. Adults are non-feeding. Only the grubs are external feeders and hairy in nature, that is shown you, and it mostly feeds on cereal grains, wheat, rice, maize, etc. And as I told, it prefers low humidity and high temperature. So Capra beetle, Trogoderma granarium, the family is Dermistidae. It is slightly smaller in size, 2 to 3 in size, oval, hairy body with clubbed antennae, with elytra sunmarked or with light markings, prefers high temperature and low humidity. So it is usually present in North India and not in southern part of the country. It's a grubs are the damaging states. Adults are non-feeding. Grubs are hairy in nature. First insect grubs are secondary feeders, can feed only on broken grains. But from second instar onwards, it can feed on whole grains, so it is considered as both primary as well as secondary feeders. One typical feature associated with the infestation of beetle is the presence of exuvia in the grain. So that is with respect to Capra beetle, Trogoderma granarium. This is the life cycle. Let's go through when I upload the slides in the model. Coming to the next, that is flow beetle, Tribolium castaneum. The family is Tenepraeonidae. This is one of the most cosmopolitan pests in the world. It's seen almost everywhere in the world, irrespective of the weather pattern, whether it can be tropical scenario or a temperate scenario. Flow beetles are present. Has anyone seen a flow beetle? That is an extremely common insect. When in your household, you might have seen whenever your mother is taking rice flour or wheat flour for any preparation. Usually, nowadays we are using a lot of packed wheat flour and ashirwad, and also you won't get much of infestation. If you purchase some loose maida or something, if you see it, you can see some small reddish colored insects in the sea. Have you seen it? Natural infestation. You might have seen it during, yes, actually I've seen it. You might have seen it in the practical exams, practical classes during your UG. Yes, this because tribolium is extremely common. It's not only infest flow, it's a pest which attacks. It's a secondary pest. It's not at all a primary pest, but it's a pest of processed products. That means it can't, theoretically speaking, it's a secondary pest because it can't feed whole grains. But it's a primary pest of stored grains, processed products. That means that uh, if you powder the grain, then it is vulnerable to tribolium attack. So it is considered as a primary pest of processed product. It can also attack grains, but as only as a secondary pest. It can't attack grains, whole grains. It can attack only already damaged grain. Usually, if we have a tribolium, if we have a Cytophilus trochoderma or a Rhizoperth attack in any grain, then later on we usually see tribolium infestation also. But in the case of processed product, rice flour, wheat flour, etc., we don't see Cytophilus, trochoderma or Rhizoperth. Only we will see tribolium. And this is having a slightly bigger size, 3 to 4.5 mm in size, flat and reddish brown in color that you can see. See, a flat and reddish brown in color, almost red in color, and the antenna is clubbed. Now, if you remember it, that is clubbed antenna is seen in drugstore beetle stichobium. Then we have discussed it in the case of groundnut beetle carried on. Now we are discussing it in the that Capra beetle trochoderma and tribolium. All those are having clubbed antennae and flat and reddish brown in color. It's a primary as well as secondary pest that I told you. It's a primary pest of processed products, but secondary pest of other grains. So it's mainly a pest of flow and processed milled products. Both adults as well as grubs feed on processed products. Both stages are damaging, and the heavy infestation of tribolium changes the color of the flour. Usually, any rice cereal flour is white in color, especially rice flour and wheat flour and all. So, this color of this flour changes from white to yellow because of the infestation of tribolium. And if it is in a sealed container, if you open the infested container, there will be a very bad smell coming out of that, very bad smell coming out of that, so that there will be a pungent disagreeable odor for tribolium infestation. So flower beetles are uh, found all over the world, 3 to 4.5 mm in size, reddish brown in color, and clubbed antennae. And class level. It's a primary pest of processed products, especially milled products such as flour, and it is it is mainly a secondary, considered as a secondary pest because it can't attach whole grains. Grubs as well as adults both are damaging, and the color of the infested flour changes to yellow, and there will be a bad odor from the infested grain. And love is mobile external feeder. Adults live for a long, very long period, and maybe for 3 to 4 months together. So even if you don't provide food, the adults can live for 3 to 4 months together. Eggs is laid in the floor itself, and larvae is mobile and external feeder. You've seen my student Shika is working on tribolium, and he is working on X of tribolium. So saving out X of tribolium is also not that difficult. Okay. So what we do is we will allow the tribolium to lay eggs in wheat flour. Then after releasing the adults for about 3 to 5 days, we will remove the adults and seal the flour, and you can see X in the seed. So that is the way we usually go for it. So that's with respect to tribolium. Then another insect pest, which is also a secondary pest and also mainly seen on processed products, is saw-toothed grain beetle or Acephalus surinamensis. Or Acephalus surinamensis, the family is Sylvanidae. It can be easily recognized by this typical feature. You can see serrations on either side of the thorax. This is the thorax, and you can see so like serrations, 6 sword like serrations on either side of the thorax. That is one typical feature of Oryzophilus. Oryzophilus is a typical secondary pest. We usually detect Oryzophilus in most of the grains damaged with the primary pests such as pulse beetle, Cytophilus, Rhizoperta, Tropoderma, whatever be it, the primary feeders will get Oryzophilus as a secondary pest. It also usually comes along with Tribolium. So it is slightly smaller than Tribolium. It is 3 mm in size, flattened dark brown to dark gray. You can see the color of it. It's not reddish brown in color. It's dark brown to dark gray. It's flattened. I've shown you the serrations on either side of the thorax. You can specifically mention it as either side of thorax because it is on the thorax only. It's a pest of almost all the products. It's a secondary pest we can see in almost all the products, not only in cereals. But it resembles tribulum, but it is small in size. It's not an extremely damaging insects, but it is common in many of the already damaged grain. It causes roughening of grain surface because it's not an internal feeder; it's an external feeder, and it feeds from outside and cause roughening of the grain surface. What you can say, just like scratching of the grain surface that lead to roughening of the grain surface. And just like tribolium, there will be an off odor if Oryzophilus infestation is there. So I told it's a typical secondary pest and an external feeder. So sawtooth grain beetle, the typical character is that six tooth-like serrations on either side of the thorax, smaller than tribolium, 3 mm in size, flattened dark brown to gray. It's a external feeder, secondary pest infesting almost all the products and causes roughening of grain surface and off odor. Similar to tribolium, it is eggs are laid in the commodity itself, that is the any processed products itself, always mobile external feeder. Adult is also feeding. Adults can live without food for about 3 years. Coming to another that's a minor pest, Latheticus oryz, a long-headed flower beetle belonging to the same family of tribolium, that is Tenebrionidae. Um, so this is usually associated with tribolium, but the thing is that this is extremely small in size, 3 mm in size. Uh, so this is very common nowadays whenever we see a tribolium infestation. If you see a tribolium infestation, sometimes you can see a similar size, a similar colored, similar shaped insect, but it is small, will be smaller than tribolium. You see, tribolium was about 4.5 mm in size, but Latheticus is 3 mm in length, slightly smaller. That's one way we identify it. Slender, fat, flat, and yellowish brown in color. See, looks almost similar to tribolium. Only thing is that it is smaller in size, reddish brown in color, but it is having clubbed antennae, and its head is slightly elongated compared to thorax and abdomen. And compared to tribolium, also the head is slightly elongated. That's why it is called as uh, long-headed flower beetle. So antennae is five-segmented club. It's not a serious pest, usually associated with tribolium. It's a secondary pest, external feeder, mainly seen in very old grains and attacks mainly processed food such as flours. Just have a knowledge of Latheticus, it's not that important. So that's with respect to long-headed flower beetle. Then comes Cryptolustus ferruginus, belonging to the family Limofloidae. If you visit any FCA go down, they will usually say that we have a problem of limo. They usually call it as limo. So actually, it is Cryptolustus ferruginus flat grain beetle. This is extremely smaller insect. I don't know whether I'll be able to take you to an FCA go down, but when we visit an FCA go down, you can easily see three insects. One, usually it is Cytophilus. Second, there will be Tribolium. and there you can see very small insects moving all over the garden. If you observe the walls, floor, etc., you can see very small insects moving very quickly on this. And this is nothing but flat grain beetle, Cryptolestes ferruginea. See the size; it is extremely small, very small in size, 1.5 to 2 mm, flattened reddish brown in color, hair-like antennae. Both adults and grubs, see, it is having hair-like antennae. Very small insect. Damages cereals as well as old seeds. Nowadays, FCA considers this as a many major pest because even if we have the presence of insect in a grain, even if the number is low, it is unacceptable. According to the FSSA guidelines, if insects are present in a grain, it is unacceptable. So even if it is a very minute insect, if it is detected, they have a chance of losing that particular lot. And it has the ability to survive many of the or insecticidal treatments which is routinely conducted in FCA godons. It resists the fumigant, that is aluminum phosphide, which is commonly used. It resists almost all the insecticides, malathion, deltamethrin. These are the insecticides commonly used. It doesn't have the insecticides or any fumigant doesn't have any effect on cryptolestes. So it usually survives in those difficult scenarios. Though its damage is pretty low, but it is a pest of extremely high infestation power, and especially in FCA Gordon. I haven't seen this infestation in home, but other Gordons it is extremely critical. Okay, till now we have discussed about coleopteran pests. Now we have four lepidopteran pests infesting stored grains. The first one is Angumois grain moth, Cytotroga cerealia. If you want to see Cytotroga infestation, go to the processing yard of seed technology. Has anyone, those who studied in the same campus itself, they might have seen the seed processing. Have you seen the seed processing yard of seed technology department? There is a huge godown also. Yes, that's near to the KU school. So if you go there, you can see there will be bags of seeds stacked in that godown. And in that bags, if you just touch that bag, you can see some moths flying out. And that is nothing but Angumois great moth, Cytotropa cerealia. Usually, if you see my slide, I think I have, yes. In the first sentence, it is written that it is more abundant in mountainous areas. It's usually written in literature like that. That's why still I don't. So when Madhusar and Rosemary teacher was telling about Cytodroga infestation, I was a bit skeptical because I was not sure whether Cytodroga will be is seen here because it is extremely tropical in nature, our conditions. But it is infesting it. It is common in Kerala. Then after on, when I see everywhere rice grains are stored, we have Angumois grain moth infestation, Cytotropa infestation. Earlier, I thought it as Coursera, but when we observe closely, it is nothing but Cytotropa. So it is a very common pest in Kerala now, especially in rice, unprocessed rice. It doesn't, that means paddy, not in rice. So that's a very difficult pest to manage. And the forewings are pale grayish brown in color. You can see pale grayish brown in color. And for with respect to hind wings, you can have the hind wings are fringed with hairs. You can see hind wings are with hairs, and in the hind wings you can see a finger like pointing towards the tip of the hind wing. The hind wing is pointed towards the apex. So that is the few typical features of Cytodroga. Hind wings are fringed with hairs, and the hind wing we have a finger-like projection towards the apex. So forewings are pale grayish brown in color, wings fringed with hairs, forewings tapered to the apex, hind wing with finger-like projection. You can see the finger-like projection, and forewing you can see it tapers towards the tip. The width decreases as it move towards the apex. So it is mainly a pest of paddy, maize, wheat, etc. It infests just like Cytophilus and Calosoprochus. It can also infest the crop when the crop is in the field itself. Listen one thing clearly. Angamous grain moth is the only primary pest, lepidopteran primary pest. Usually, all others are not primary pest. Catra also can be considered as a primary pest because, but it doesn't infest cereal much. It infests dried fruits, and it is an internal feeder. Among those Lepidopteran infesting grains, this is the primary pest as well as an internal feeder. Adults, as like any other Lepidopteran pest, adults are non-feeding, only the larvae are feeding. Larvae bores into the grains, so the larvae will be remaining inside the grains and the grains will be filled with excreta. I'll show a picture of it. And because of the feeding of the insect, there will be fecal contamination. Silk threads will be produced by the larvae, and that will be the and the scales of the adults, which is present in the insect, can be allergic and affect grain quality and leave a sickening smell, very bad smell. So, with respect to Citrodroga, it's a adults have a grayish brown forewing. The wings are fringed with hairs, forewings tapered towards the apex. Hind wing have a finger-like projection. It's a primary pest. It is an internal feeder. The larvae bores into the grains. The grains will be filled with excreta. They mainly feed on cereals, and the grains will have fecal contamination. There will be silken threads produced by the young larvae, and the scales can affect the grain quality. So here that picture is entirely clear. You can see that hind wing with that finger-like projection. This is the adult. See the larvae, it is extremely smaller in size. It bores into the grain and the grains will be filled with excrete. Coming to the next one, that is a rice moth. I think at least some of you have seen rice moth because that is usually shown during UG practical class because it is the host for multiplication of trichogram. So, but this is a typical secondary pest. Do you know what is the medium on which Coursera is reared? Anyone? If you remember your UG classes, Bajra based, what kind of Bajra? What kind of Bajra? Broken, yes. That is crushed Bajra, yes. It is only on broken grains we can rear Coursera. So that means it is a secondary pest. Whole grains it won't attack. So it is a pest of broken grains. It infests almost all cereals, seed, copra, dried fruits, etc. And the typical feature is that it makes webbings of the grain. It makes webbings of the grain, and the larvae will be remaining inside the webbings. It is a secondary pest. It is an external feeder, and the larvae remains within the webbing and feeds on the grain. You might have seen sometimes in flour and or wheat flour, rice flour, etc. If you see it, you can see some webbed grains. ഞങ്ങളുടെ നാട്ടിലൊക്കെ ചിലപ്പോൾ അമ്മ പറയും അരിപ്പൊടി കട്ട കുത്തിപ്പോയി എന്ന് പറയും. You might be observed it. That is nothing but rava and usually there will be webbings in the grains itself. If you see it, you can see small clumps of this one flow. That is nothing but Coursera infested. If you open it, you can see that larva. So it has the typical ability to web together the grains. The larvae remains within the webs and it feeds on the grains. It's an external feeder, leads to a foul odor. And adults are pale grayish brown moth, the grayish brown moth and broad shoulders. This is broad shoulders. it is easily distinguishable from Angmo's grain mold because though there are fringes of hairs, it's not that prominent as that of Cytotroga. That finger-like projections and all is not option. See, curving, it's not tapering towards the apex. The width usually it is increasing. So that is with respect to Coursera. It's a external feeder, secondary pest. Larvae webs together the grains and remains within the grain and feed on it. This is how the usually the adult looks like in reality. See, this is how the webbing of the Coursera looks like. All the grains will be webbed together. Coming to the next pest, that is almond moth, Ephistia cautella. Also, it is called as Cadra cautella. This is a pest which infests expensive commodities such as dried fruits like almonds, raisins, figs, etc. So dried almonds, dried raisins, figs, all these are extremely costly, and this is the one which we pest which we normally observe it. So whenever you purchase all these things, you just check whether there is an insect infestation or not, because usually we miss the infestation. We usually don't break open almonds and see whether the whether an insect. What we normally do, if you have an almond, you usually eat it by one without checking it. But many a times we have an infestation of uh, this Cadra cautela in the dried fruits. That's very common. I have a personal experience of it. So this normally we don't see the adults and all over here. We usually get. I have seen it mainly when I got an infested sample of dried figs. So it was fully infested with this Cadra cautela, Ephistia cautela. And the forewings is gray with darker marking. I will show you. It is extremely gray with darker markings, and the larvae is about white to pink in color with black spots on the skin. So that is white to pink with black spots. That is with respect to larvae. That is typical feature of Ephistia cautela. We don't normally see this pinkish coloration on any other Lepidopteran pests of storage. Most of them are white to creamish white in color. And again, it's a secondary pest, not a primary pest. It webs together the grains or dried fruits, remains in the webbing and feeds on it. So that is pretty common. So this is a pest of dried fruits, very common. The larvae is white to pink in color with black spots, external feeder and secondary pest. Coming to the next one, Plodia interpunctella, Indian meal moth, Pyralidae. I haven't seen Plodia yet. I haven't seen it. I don't know what is the intensity of Plodia infestation. The forewings are bicolored. You can see it. It is creamish white at the base, moving towards the apex. It is reddish brownish in nature. So it bicolored in nature, cream on the base and reddish brown at the apex. The larvae is creamy white. You can say, I'll show the picture of larvae. Yes, creamy white. Almost all the Lepidopteran larvae infesting storage are creamish white, except for the one which is Ephistia cautella. You can see that base of it is creamish white and tip apex is reddish brown in color in the case of wings, forewings. And it infests almost all the products, dried fruit, cereals, nuts, cocoa, etc. Again, it is an external feeder. It webs together the grains and feeds on the grain. So this is with respect to the Lepidopteran and Coleopteran pests infesting storage. You can go through it. Almost all I have covered. One more thing I will just cover today is sources of book lice. This is just for your information because it is gradually becoming an issue in our country also. sausage book lies. It's extremely small in size. You might have seen whenever you people are having a lot of insect collection during your UG. Now the last two batches they have escaped the insect collection because of this COVID pandemic. So if you are keeping your insect boxes in your room and leaving it for about 2 or 3 weeks, you go for any autumn vacation, Christmas vacation, or anything. Once you reopen it, you can see that very small insect, just like head lice, moving all over the insect box. Have you seen it? Anyone? Very small insect, extremely smaller in size. No? What we usually do in our department is if we want to sow seeds, we open an insect box, old insect box, just check it. We will at least find at 10 or 20 of sow seeds. We will collect it and we will show it to you. That's the way we usually collect sow seeds because sow seeds are extremely common. This is a especially a scavenger. That's why see the size, it is 0.7 to 1 mm, flat, wingless in size, secondary pest, feeds on mold. It's a scavenger. That's why we usually see it in insect boxes. Feeds on any dried material of plant and animal origin. That's why it is very common in insect boxes where we keep our dried insect specimens. It is damages insect specimens. So usually we take care of infestation of sources in our insect collection feeds on dried plant and animal materials. See, you can see the sausage over here. These are wingless, very small insects. Mainly, it causes allergic reactions in human beings. Not much damage to green, but because of its allergic reactions, it is gaining more and more importance nowadays. Anything else? Any clarifications? Any doubts? Are you following it? Yes or no?